I was 44, married for nearly 20 years, and by all appearances had the kind of stable suburban life people envy. 2 teenage children, a husband who provided, and a comfortable home. But what people didn't see was the loneliness that had settled into the core of our marriage. My husband and I hadn't truly connected in years. We functioned more like roommates than lovers. Then came Adam. He was my son's best friend, 20, too charming, bright, and often around our house. At first, I thought nothing of it. He was like a second son. But over time, things shifted, our conversations deepened, he started noticing things about me. How tired I looked, how I seemed quieter when my husband was around. He listened in a way my husband hadn't in years. It felt innocent, until it didn't. One evening, after a long wine-fueled conversation while my son was out with friends, Adam kissed me. I froze. Every part of me screamed to stop it. But I didn't. I kissed him back. What followed was months of secrecy, stolen moments, whispered phone calls, and a level of passion I hadn't felt in decades. I kept telling myself it wasn't serious, that it was just a phase, an escape. But the truth is, I had fallen for him, deeply. Guilt became a constant companion. I couldn't look my husband in the eyes. I hated myself every time I saw the joy on my son's face when Adam walked through the door. I knew I was betraying not only my husband but also my son. But part of me felt alive again, for the first time in years. Everything unraveled when my husband found a message Adam had sent me late one night. He confronted me, devastated. The confrontation tore our family apart. My son hasn't spoken to either of us since. Adam moved away, overwhelmed with shame and confusion. Now I live alone. My marriage is over. My relationship with my son remains fractured, and Adam is just a memory. Would I do it again? I ask myself that every day. What I can say is this: emotional hunger can be more dangerous than physical need. And sometimes love comes from the most unexpected and most damaging places. Emotional vulnerability often acts as a silent invitation for connection, especially in relationships where that need has long gone unmet. In long-term marriages or partnerships, it's not uncommon for emotional intimacy to fade, even if the physical or functional aspects of the relationship continue. When this happens, one partner may begin to experience a kind of emotional isolation, a deep, aching loneliness that no amount of conversation or routine interactions can fix. This vulnerability doesn't always lead to infidelity, but it creates fertile ground for emotional attachments to take root in unexpected and sometimes inappropriate places. Such was the case in this story, where the emotional void left by a disengaged marriage opened the door for an unforeseen bond between a woman and her son's best friend to develop. It wasn't planned or pursued with ill intent, but it grew organically out of repeated exposure, mutual attentiveness, and a recognition of one another's emotional presence. In many cases, affairs don't begin with lust or physical desire, but rather with empathy, validation, and consistent attention, elements that are deeply emotional at their core. The woman in the story was emotionally starved. Her husband may have been a good provider, but he had stopped showing interest in her inner life, her fears, her dreams, even her day-to-day emotions. In that space of neglect, she began to feel invisible. When Adam, her son's friend, entered the picture, he unknowingly became a mirror. He noticed things. He asked how she was doing, really doing, and waited for a real answer. He complimented her when she was looking tired or worn out, not to flatter her, but to acknowledge her existence. That kind of emotional presence, especially when absent elsewhere in life, is intoxicating. It's not about the age difference or the taboo nature of the relationship. It's about someone finally seeing you when you've felt unseen for so long. The emotional connection between them didn't just arise from proximity. It came from mutual needs. While the woman was emotionally neglected, Adam was likely in a phase of his life where he sought understanding and intimacy beyond his peers. Young adulthood is full of uncertainty and emotional chaos, and sometimes younger individuals gravitate toward older people for emotional grounding. What began as casual conversations slowly turned into emotionally charged exchanges, full of unsaid words, stolen glances, and lingering silences. Over time, their emotional tether became impossible to ignore. Neither of them may have entered the situation thinking it would evolve into something so consuming, but emotional attachments rarely ask for permission. They just happen, especially when both parties are open, even unconsciously, to being seen and valued. The complexity of their emotional connection was further deepened by the environment in which it grew. Being in close quarters, within the walls of a home that was supposed to symbolize safety, trust, and family, gave their interactions an added layer of intimacy. There's something particularly powerful about connecting with someone in a space where you should feel most yourself, especially when you don't. For the woman, her home had become a space of detachment and performance, a place where she played roles: wife, mother, housekeeper. But with Adam, those roles melted away. She could speak freely, laugh without worrying about judgment, and express emotions that had long been suppressed. In doing so, she experienced a side of herself she had nearly forgotten existed. This emotional vulnerability didn't just lead to a bond it created confusion. Guilt often coexists with emotional affairs, even before they turn physical, because the boundaries of what is acceptable in a relationship are so often blurred by emotional intimacy. The woman knew her feelings were inappropriate, yet they felt undeniably real. That tension, the battle between moral understanding and emotional fulfillment, created an internal war she could not easily escape. And as the bond deepened, so did the fear of discovery, fear of loss, and fear of hurting the people she loved. But at the heart of it, the relationship wasn't about rebellion or betrayal for the sake of excitement. It was about the human need to be emotionally held, to be listened to be loved not out of duty but out of genuine care. That need, when unmet for years, can lead people down paths they never thought they'd walk. In this story, emotional vulnerability didn't just crack the door open, it blew it wide open, revealing how a lack of emotional connection within a marriage can lead even the most responsible, loving individuals to seek solace in unexpected and often dangerous places. It wasn't physical chemistry or even loneliness in the traditional sense that sparked the affair. It was the hunger to be seen, heard, and emotionally understood. That kind of emotional intimacy, once discovered, is hard to walk away from even when the cost of holding onto it is devastating. The weight of secrets and the consequences of concealed emotions in a relationship plagued by infidelity are often heavier than people realize. When a person engages in an emotionally charged and secret affair, especially with someone close to the family, it becomes a psychological burden that grows over time. In the story of the woman who fell for her son's best friend, secrecy wasn't merely about hiding a physical act. It was about concealing an entire emotional life. The affair didn't just disrupt her marriage, it fractured the trust that once held her family together. The secrecy demanded constant vigilance, layers of lies, and emotional compartmentalization that began to eat away at her sense of self. Keeping something so emotionally consuming hidden required her to live two lives, one as the dutiful wife and mother, and the other as a woman experiencing intimacy, vulnerability, and excitement she hadn't felt in decades. That division creates immense internal pressure, and it rarely holds forever. As with most emotionally driven affairs, the longer it continued, the deeper the secrecy became embedded in her daily life. She found herself rewriting stories, fabricating alibis, timing conversations, and hiding expressions that might expose her inner conflict. Even moments of silence or distracted behavior could be misinterpreted, so she had to manage not just her lies, but her entire demeanor around her husband and son. Living with that level of mental and emotional tension day after day is exhausting, and it begins to alter how a person sees themselves. She was no longer just hiding a secret from others. She was hiding parts of herself from herself. The guilt became more than a feeling. It became a persistent voice that questioned her integrity, her identity, and her worth. Yet, despite the weight of guilt, she couldn't walk away easily. The emotional fulfillment she found in the affair was addictive. Unlike her emotionally stale marriage, this secret relationship made her feel alive. That emotional awakening was powerful enough to dull her moral compass, at least temporarily, but no secret of this magnitude remains in the shadows forever. When her husband discovered a late-night message from Adam, the entire illusion crumbled. The fallout wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the betrayal coming from someone within their own home, involving someone they trusted like family. Her son, once so close to both his mother and his best friend, now stood as a symbol of everything she had broken. The shock he must have felt of realizing that his friend had crossed a sacred boundary and that his mother had allowed it was immeasurable. The emotional betrayal affected not just one person but rippled outward, devastating everyone involved. These are the hidden consequences of emotionally attached infidelity. It's not just about broken promises or romantic deception. It's about the long-term emotional damage done to the people who were unaware but deeply connected to the relationship. Her husband's reaction was not just rooted in the hurt of being cheated on. It was the compounded pain of realizing that he had been emotionally replaced, and that his home, his wife, and his sense of family stability had been silently eroding. The secrecy made the betrayal even more brutal. If emotional disconnection is painful, emotional exclusion is soul-crushing. Being left out of your partner's inner world, especially when that world was shared with someone so close, strips away one's sense of trust, safety, and confidence. The aftermath was not one of dramatic confrontation and immediate forgiveness or resolution. It was quiet devastation. Her son cut ties. Her husband, heartbroken and disillusioned, ended the marriage. Adam distanced himself, unable to handle the shame and the magnitude of what had happened, and she was left alone, not just physically, but emotionally as well. The secrecy that once gave her affair its allure had now become her prison. There was no one to share the burden with, no comforting presence to justify the pain she had caused. What had once felt like emotional salvation now stood as a monument to everything she had lost. She wasn't just grieving the end of her marriage, she was grieving the loss of her son's trust, her family's unity, and her own moral clarity. What this story reveals so clearly is that secrecy doesn't preserve love, it distorts it. The longer a secret affair continues, the more it demands from the person keeping it. It consumes emotional energy, fosters dishonesty, and creates a widening gap between reality and the emotional fantasy being maintained in private. The consequences, when revealed, are rarely just about the act itself. They are about everything that was withheld, the truth, the respect, the transparency, and the emotional honesty that relationships are built on. Secrets don't just break hearts, they change people. They force everyone involved to question everything, their roles, their memories, their identities, and in some cases, they leave damage that time alone cannot repair.